What's up guys, Eden Chavez here, EdenChavez.com, and today I'm going to show you the importance of shooting RAW.
But before that, welcome to our online classroom, which we're going to talk about post-processing elements with the help of our YouTube friend.
So when you shoot RAW, you have so much more information to pull from. You have, if you were to shoot JPEG, you wouldn't be able to do what I'm about to show you.
So he said that he's going to discuss RAW. So let's see what the meaning of RAW is. So RAW files, it means a camera raw image file contains minimally processed data from the image sensor of either a digital camera, a motion camera film scanner, or other image scanner. RAW files are named so because they are not yet processed and therefore are not ready to be printed or edited with a bitmap graphics editor. So this lesson is just a continuation of our last discussions, okay? So kung napapansin nyo, it's all about multimedia, it's all about computer, photography, and everything. So this is just a connection to every lessons that we have discussed.
Take this image for example. I shot it in New York City. It was well after the sunset. I was on the top of the rock shooting towards the Empire State Building, and it's extremely underexposed. So
as you can see in his image, you can see that the image he captured is fully dark. So you can see clearly the picture. So ang gagawin niya po dito, ang palilinawin niya yung kanyang nakuha ng picture using the RAW file. Yun yung pagkakaiba ng RAW file and JPEG file. Kasi kapag RAW file po yung ginawa natin or yung format ng ating camera and nagpicture tayo, pwede pa nating i-edit yung picture na yon at palinawin, pagandahin, lagyan ng mga contrast, at etc. exposure. Pwede nating lagyan yung nakuha na nating picture as long as RAW file yung gamit natin na camera file format. Pwede rin naman natin gawin yun sa JPEG. Ang mangyayari lang kapag JPEG yung ginamit nating format at i-edit pa natin, mababawasan yung quality ng picture. Possible, maging pixelated siya and everything. So sa RAW file, kahit i-edit pa natin yan, hindi mababawasan ang quality ng picture. So ito naman yung meaning ng ating JPEG files. A JPEG file is an image saved in a compressed graphic format standardized by the Joint Photographic Expert Group. It supports up to 24-bit color and is compressed using lossy compression, which may noticeably reduce the image quality if high amounts of compression are used. So if you guys are going to take some photos, I highly encourage you guys to take photos using RAW files instead of JPEG files. If you're going to edit your pictures or you're going to post-process it. Okay po. So, exposure. So, after the RAW file and the JPEG, we're going to talk about the elements of post-processing. So, we have exposure. So, in photography, exposure is the amount of light per unit area reaching a photographic film or electronic image sensors as determined by shutter speed, lens aperture, and scene luminance. Okay po, so we're going to go back to our YouTube friend for now.
we're losing a lot of detail. We're missing most of the city. We have no idea what this even is if you glance at it. So the reason I shoot RAW, and you should always shoot RAW, is because you have so much information where you can get all of this back without having to do anything crazy. You can do it in any software you edit with, really. So this is Lightroom 5, and let's start off by opening up our shadows. That's what I usually do with most of my photos, and as you can see, this becomes visible right away. So as soon as we do that, I'm gonna come down here and go to vibrance, give it a little bit of vibrance, make it a little bit more colorful. And I can come up here and go to my exposure and just expose it a little more, just so I have a better view of the city.
So as you can see guys, he adjusted his exposure to the right. So anong nangyari? Mas luminaw yung kanyang picture. So yan yung use ng ating exposure. So next, we have the contrast. So contrast of an image refers to the difference between the light pixels and dark pixels. Low contrast images contains a narrow range of colors, while high contrast images have a bright highlight and dark shadows. So mostly ginagawa din to para medyo maging cinematic, maging ma-expose ng maayos yung brightness and darkness ng highlights and shadows natin. And then we have the improving shadow and highlight when editing. Light and shadows will brighten the dark areas. So yun nga, sinabi ko kanina. And of your photos and reveal more of shadow detail that was captured in your image. So darken the highlights or darken the light areas of your photo and reveal more of the highlight detail that was captured in your image. We also have shadows. So he already adjusted his shadow. So medyo kamag-anak siya ng ating exposure. So dito lang mas may emphasize yung shadows dun sa ating picture. So shadows are the darkest areas of the photograph. A shadow is also devoid of color. It could be the black in a photograph or just the areas that carry little light. An image with too many shadows may be underexposed and will not show much detail, although this can normally be adjusted. And then we have the clarity. The clarity slider is an excellent tool for adding punch to images without making them look unnatural. The secret is to get all your primary corrections done first: exposure, color, highlights, and shadows, but not to touch the contrast. So as I said in the explanation, sabi dito, mas maganda gamitin muna nating or edit muna natin is the exposure, the color, the highlights, and shadow, and then saka tayo magja-jump in sa ating clarity. Okay, so back muna tayo kay YouTube friend natin.
Right off the bat, we went from a black photo to a pretty cool photo, pretty cool colorful photo. Once we do this, we will come here to the highlights and we will bring them down just so we can see more of our sky over here as opposed to just the white blown out sky. Now we can come to our blacks and we can open them up a little more, but I don't like it, so we'll leave them right about there. Now our contrast, we'll bring up our contrast a little bit. So as you can see, just with a few dials, it took us less than a minute, 2 minutes. We went from a completely dark image to a pretty cool photo. So if you would have shot this in JPEG, you would not be able to do this. You could do it, but not as good. So that's why you should always shoot RAW. So here I come to my cropping tool. Not that I want to crop it, but I want to straighten out the horizon. I remember shooting this and I was freezing, I was done, but I thought I'd shoot a couple more shots before I left. So I did, and this was obviously not a good one, but shooting RAW gives me the ability to bring all these colors, bring all these lights out. So I can bring my highlights down up here as well. I like this dial up here better as opposed to this one, but I still use them both. So it's still a little underexposed in my eye, so we'll bring it up a little bit. So I think that looks pretty cool. Now I will come down here, bring up my sharpening tool just to sharpen up the city, and I want to use my masking tool, but I want to press option while I'm sliding it because I still want my sky to be you know, a little blurry, but I want my city to be really sharp. So what the masking tool does, everything that's white is being sharpened while what's black stays soft or as shot. That looks pretty good. Now my detail, I'll do the same thing. I click down on the detail dial, hold down my option key, and you can see if you bring it all the way up, the buildings become a lot more sharper. If you bring it down, they become softer. So it's entirely up to you, personal taste, and I like mine right about there. So now I will enable profile corrections, and this straightens out my photo pretty good. I will show you what that does again. So that's the lens warp that my lens gives me, but this corrects it automatically, which is a pretty dramatic improvement. So I think that looks really good. I can still come up here and go to my saturation and bring out the blue a little more, just to make it a little more colorful. If you see my photos, I like a lot of color in them. That's just how I roll. And now if you come to the hue here, you can change the hue of your colors.
Okay, so next up is our color. So you can also edit the color of your picture. So as he already shown you guys, he already changed his saturation, and in our next video, he will show how he will change his hue settings. So first up, bigay muna natin ang ating mga meaning sa mga words na gagamitin natin. So first up is the vibrance. It's a smart tool which cleverly increases the intensity of the more muted colors and leaves the already well saturated colors alone. It's sort of like feel light but for colors. Vibrance is also prevents skin tones from becoming overly saturated and not unnatural. And then the saturation, which he already shown you guys. In photography, the term saturation describes the depth or intensity of color present within an image. Saturation is also referred to as chroma. The more saturated an image is, the more colorful and vibrant it will appear. Plus, color saturation will make an image appear subdued or muted. Now, our next element is the hues. Hues are made up of the three primary colors, which are the red, blue, and yellow. The three secondary colors are orange, green, and violet that appear in the color wheel or color circle. When you refer to hue, you are referring to its pure color or the visible spectrum of basic colors that can be seen in a rainbow.
I roll. And now if you come to the hue here, you can change the hue of your colors. So let's see, so on the blue you can bring it down and you can make it green, which actually makes it for a really cool effect. Or you can make it bluer, which will start turning into a purplish color. Which, depending on the mood, you know, you can play around with that, and you can do that for every color, which is a very powerful tool to have on your hand. Now the temperature, I usually mess with this dial last. Well, it depends on my mood again, you know, that's a lie. Last first sometimes. But I remember this night was so cold, I was so freezing, I was totally over it. My buddy was still shooting and I was just done. So I want to bring that to my photo. So I'm gonna bring the slider just a little cooler, just to give it that feel of coldness, that New York cold. So I think that looks really good. So as you can see, I will put the before and after. So you can see we came from a completely useless photo to a really cool photo. And that's why you should always shoot raw. You have so much more information to pull from. You have a lot more to work with as opposed to just a JPEG or a small file. So
okay, so lahat ng elements na ito, maaari nyo magamit hindi lang po sa ating photography, hindi lang sa art. You can also use it on editing videos, especially the exposure, the contrast, the hue, the saturation. You can all use this on making your short film. So before we end our video, i-comment nyo lang yung name nyo sa ating YouTube comment box, and then the core value na nagamit nyo or natutunan nyo sa ating video for this week. Okay, yun lang po ang ating lesson for today. May the Lord smile on you. Paalam.